Good morning. Welcome to Saturday morning. Once again, this is Alterations in Real Time. I'm April Jackson of the Jackson Sewing Academy. I do have a new piece of equipment today, my lav mic. So I am just checking to make sure that everything is working okay. I'm not being too skittish, looking here and there. I just want to make sure everything is working well so that you get the best experience. Today, I'm excited. We are going to be working on another wedding gown, and today it's going to be a bustle. I'd like to introduce the gown that we will be working on. This is another beautiful dress that I found at the secondhand store. I just love whenever I find quite a modern style that I could pick up at a really good price. I like to bring into my studio, but it is also a great opportunity if bridal is something that you are thinking you want to specialize in, or you just want to add it to your alteration repertoire, but you're a little nervous about taking on clients right away. Pick up some dresses from a secondhand store, anywhere that you can get them. You might even have someone who has an older dress that might be wanting to give it away free. However you get them, bring them into your studio or wherever you do your sewing, and then do some practices on them. Whatever you need to do to feel confident, have a mannequin, have it fit somebody, anything that gives you the opportunity to practice so when you do have a client come in, you're not so nervous. And the more I experienced wedding gowns, the more that I look into them, take them apart, see how they're constructed, I came to find that they're not as intimidating as some people may like you to believe. Yes, they are a bit more complicated, and they can be. But once again, I'll always come back to it's just a piece of clothing. And when you know how to work with it, you're smooth sailing. I want to show you this dress. I want to show you some of the details that will come into play when we are doing a bustle. The bustle is one of the last things we will do that we will pin on a client. We will pin the bustle after we are sure we know where the finished hem is. And there is a specific reason for this. I'm going to show you some details on this particular gown and how they are going to relate to the bustle. At the point when we're doing anything related to the hem, we are going to want to make sure that our gown, all the underlayers have been pressed or steamed. We do not want anything crinkling underneath that will inhibit how the dress is going to fall or flow. So I have already been within the interior of the dress, and I've given it a good steam as well as the outside. Now, one thing you're going to notice as well, most gowns that have been purchased when they're brand new, whether it's, I think, even a made dress, the hem will be to the floor in the front. But as you get to the side seam, you will notice it's already starting to flare out and be long and touching the ground. That is a crucial element because when I hem a gown on a client, I always make sure whatever the length is in the front, I continue that length right to the side seam. My reasoning for that is when I do my bustle, it makes it a lot easier, and I don't have to worry about bringing anything up on the side, which is going to look a little wonky when it's viewed from the front. So one thing I am going to do with this particular dress, just for this pinning, is I'm going to flip up my side seam, just pin it under so it is at the same length as the front of my dress, and then we will proceed to turn the dress around so we can look at the bustle. So give me a second to do that. Yes. Right. The front is perfect, just touching the floor. Right here, we are going to start flipping this under so that it is at the same height, right, on the side seam. Another reason I prefer to have a wedding dress, the finished length, equal to the floor on the side seam. The bride's going to be appearing in quite a few pictures, and she's always going to have someone standing by her side. So if you had the gown here coming out to the side, then someone's going to be stepping on it. And that is one thing we want to avoid. This is actually, I would consider this to be a fairly simple style. What thing to keep in mind, when we do a bustle, where we're going to be placing the pinning, it will vary from dress to dress. And a dress like this that has, it's a full skirt from the hip down, but it does have a seam here. We would not want to be taking up some of this extra material and just having it stop in the middle of the skirt. It breaks up the line. One of the things too, then it just kind of looks a little misplaced. We always want to have it where the skirt is one continuous line still. So if we're bringing this excess up, we're going to make sure it's pinned where her skirt is joining the bodice. If this was a full skirt that had like a waistline seam, we would be bringing this up to the waistline seam. We don't necessarily, like I said, want to have just a little, like something like that in the middle of nowhere. It just looks a little misplaced, as well as there's not a lot of, it'll move around a little too much as the bride's moving, and we don't want that either. We're going to fluff out our train, and a lot of it is trial and error at first, just playing. This particular dress, the outer material and the lining are joined. There are no other layers, so I'm not concerned with anything else at this point. The first point I'm going to make is I want the center back. We're always going to start at the center back. Our goal is to bring up the train so that it is either just touching the floor, like right even at the floor, or just touching it, maybe at the most 2 inches laying down. It still maintains the look of like that formality. Okay. I'm going to bring it up to my point and hold it there. And I'm going to pin that in place. Right there. All right. Once you pin it, take a look at that again. I think that's still too much. There's still too much on the floor there. I'm going to bring it up just a little bit more. Remember, your client is trusting that you know what to do. In a situation like this, I would always take a look at it and make sure I'm happy with it first, because I know from experience what the best practice is. Then I will ask my client what she thinks. The last thing we want is to have the client want a lot still training on the ground, but where I'm still not happy with, and this just has to do with the fact that the skirt hasn't been hemmed, is where it's still falling on the side seams. And you will get an idea of what I'm talking about from the side seams already being on the floor a little too much in the beginning. Here it's perfect because it's on the side, it's right flush to the ground, but here it is still, there's too much. If that hangs down, that's still too much there. And with this style of skirt, we don't want to necessarily bring another point. Pull this up here, it's a little too obvious. That is why it is important to have your front hem continue and start blending into their train, because if that was better blended like that, I'm going to put another pin in there. Then now we're going to have that nice smooth line flush to the floor. Okay, there we go. There we go. And now I'm happy with that now, because once our center, we're going to spin her around again, tuck this in. There. We have the back of the skirt flush to the floor. And now it's starting to just slightly touch the floor at the very center back. I'm going to check this side for her because it'll probably be doing the same. Yeah. Just make sure that our front hem is just blending nicely into the back so that we don't have too much on the floor. There we go. All right. I'm going to get my center out. And basically, this would be our finished, where we're going to do our pinning. Another option that we might do with this particular dress, as she's going to be moving around, let me just move the dress a little bit. She's moving around here. You can see that it's not going to keep this really nice triangle look that we want at the back as she moves. So what we could do is we'll make sure this is tucked in. And I've had brides who want to have that out. It's whichever they like. But to keep a nice clean line, I would even consider putting a snap or a hook of some sort down, flare this out where this may fall with there. I might actually just put a pin in there just to just to hold it. There we go, like that. And then I'd have my client walking around a little bit more so that we can see how this is moving. But I think that will also help keep this triangle, keep this shape without it all collapsing in on itself. But I'm still not 100% on this. We'll figure that out in just a second. I'm going to mark where that fold is with my pin. I actually like using a double pin. All alterations may vary slightly from one to the other. Like I mentioned, this particular dress, there are no other layers that will be affected with the bustle. If there are other layers, then we would do them separately. But right now, we're just going to focus on this dress. This is the point that will be flipped up and brought up to the waistline. We are going to be creating a fabric loop here, which will hook onto our clear button. So let's start with our loop. All right. Going to be using a nice size needle. You don't want anything too small, too big. It's just a medium sharp. The reason we want a fairly nice size needle is we are going to be loading it up with 6 strands of thread, 3 doubled. I have 3 strands. I have a nice crisp white thread. I also made sure I wasn't wearing much or any lipstick. Whenever you're wearing, working with white, do not wear makeup. It may transfer onto your garment. I'd be trying a whole nother thread. I'm not sure why the thread is doing that, whether that's something transferring off my hands or whether it's just the under base, the color of the thread itself. The reason I might keep it for us is because you'll be able to see a little bit clearer the loop when it is done, which for an actual client, that is not what we want. But for our little tutorial today, we will keep that just so that you can see a little bit better. When I worked for a bridal salon, we were instructed to, if the dress was an off-white, to use an off-white thread and to match our threads accordingly. I found that if I use any type of different color thread other than white, even on an off-white, it just looks darker and dingy. And I just like the white. I want it to kind of blend in as seamless as possible. I have a button that I'm going to add to the top of our waistband. I usually would use a clear button, but for today, I'm not going to get all stressed over the fact I can't find my clear buttons. We do have some clear buttons. They're about 1/2 inch in diameter that I generally would use, and they tend to blend in. For today, I'm just going to use like a white bridal button that I found. And right now what I see, all I see is my strings, the 6 strand. And that tells me that it's not locked in enough. That eventually that is the weakest link, and we always know the weakest link is going to break. If somebody were to step on this, it would be easy for them to break. So I am going to take my needle again, and I'm going to make sure I'm in some of my, like, those crochet type stitches that we just made. Make sure it goes through that and then into the base of my crocheted little loop. Make sure it's nice and tight. These stitches nobody will see. They're just kind of blending in with the rest of the loop that we just made. And this is another good reason why I like having my thimble for moments like now when I need to be pushing my needle through with my finger. The last thing we want is to be just using our hands and then pricking your finger slipping, and then you're going to bleed on the dress. Now that I'm really secure and happy with my loop, I'm going to take the remainder of my string, pierce it through to the underside. This is now on the underside, and this is where I'm going to lock these stitches. A couple of fine back tacks, 2 and 3. Let's clip that. And this dress does not have any other design elements to it. I've had a concern that may come up is the fact that we don't have a way to hide our little loop. And I'm never overly concerned about that. We could, if you really wanted to get super fancy, we could have opened up the seam, both layers, and somehow tuck this loop in between, but then you're going to have a little hole which could show. Also, like I mentioned, if this loop was bright white, the same white as the fabric, no one's really going to notice that. And even if they do, we need a place to put the bustle up. It's not like the guests coming to the wedding, this is going to be their main concern. We really need to have something there. And if you want a bustle, it has to be there. You can always add a little piece of lace if you want it, but then you're going to have a little piece of lace in the middle of nowhere. I just think it's a non-issue. It's not something that we really need to be worried about. And it's the same with the bride, just making sure if you don't make a big deal out of it, then they're not going to make a big deal out of it. When I'm working on bridals like this, I also, if I could continue using the same thread, for some projects I would, but when it comes to bridal, I don't. My reasoning is, after I've used the thread and it's been running through my hands, regardless of how clean your fingers are, it's going to get some staining. I would just rather start with a clean strand. All right. I am going to put our button. I'm going to move our ties away. This particular dress obviously has a corset back. Our ties normally would be tucked and stashed underneath into this hole here, but I just left them out. One thing I don't like about this dress, and let me tell you, this corset back, this is our client's natural waist, and this corset back continues down past her waist. This is where like her butt's going to start. And I personally do not like having my corset back come down this far. My reasoning too, if you see here, there's not even any loops to continue tying the corset that far. This is just a mannequin, of course. So I can tighten up my corset back here. But if this was a real person, we may just have more hip in this area that we can't tighten it up. I just would normally include a zipper from here down as opposed to continuing my corset. But I didn't design the dress, so we're going to work with what we've got. What we have now is this little opening here from where our corset stops to this opening. I would probably take my button and I'm going to sew my button to the modesty panel. That way it's centered, but it also won't be as visible as if I took my button and put it right on top of the outside of the dress. And here you can see it's going to be on one of either side. I would just rather have it centered. All right. I'm going to use the same technique that is demonstrated in my sewing on a button tutorial. That's available within the membership section. Okay. This particular bridal button has a little fabric, little nub at the very back, and that's where we're going to be attaching our thread. Bring that through, pick a little bit of our material, push that through. As I mentioned earlier, I normally would use a clear button, and my clear buttons have generally, I think, two holes. The ultimate goal when we are putting any kind of bustle button, we are going to want to make sure that it is very secure, but also, once again, we want it to kind of blend in. We need to make sure that it's not super obvious. All right, there. I'm going to finish off with a couple of back taps. I just happened to have a button that was the perfect material. Matches the dress nicely. We're going to tuck that back in. If this dress was for a client, as it stands, this modesty panel is just kind of resting between the layers and it's being held up due to the friction. We would need to make sure that the modesty panel was secured on both sides. One side it would be hand sewn down, and on the other side we'd have some snaps. Otherwise, the weight of our skirt may just pull this modesty panel out. For our tutorial, I'm not that concerned, but if this was for a client, that is something we're going to want to make sure we did. At this point, we're going to hook our loop onto our button, and we're going to see how it's looking. If we have to fight to get the loop on, our client's going to be fighting, or somebody. It's always a good little test run to see if our loop is big enough. It's another reason I like having my clear buttons, because they slide better than the fabric buttons. Okay, I have decided that this loop is too small, so we're going to do it again. For this button, you would see how I'm really fighting to get it onto here. It looks like it should fit perfectly, but if I have to fight and I can't get it on, then our client's not going to be able to get it on. All that means is we are going to redo that loop, and we're going to make it just a little longer, probably by like just maybe a couple of eighths of an inch, but that will make all the difference in the world. Clean thread, get rid of the old one. And this is how it works in the real world. Not everything works out the first time. I'm going to snip, get rid of that. Before that totally disappears, I'm going to remark this area with a pin, and then I'm going to get rid of all my old strings that I just had in there, because I already did my back tacking and I have knots on this side. I don't know why this thread's looking a little dingy when it's being used, but what I also would do is I would make sure this thread was set aside, and whenever I was working on a bridal and I was doing this type of sewing, I would make sure it wasn't used, just because it does look dingy for some crazy reason. Now, start where we did before, bring our needle up through the center. Leave in the comments, I'm curious, do you use a thimble as you sew? The tailor who taught me, we always did, and I just got used to it. It was never anything that hindered my sewing, and I found that when I was doing hand sewing, if I didn't have it, it just felt like something was missing. All right, let's continue with that chain stitch. I'm going to pick about an eighth of an inch of the material, and the strings, we have our loop and the straight string, and we pull the straight string through the loop and pull the loop down to the base. It's like hand crocheting. And once again, pierce this side and pierce through to the other side. I'm going to do a little back tack. Make sure there's no extra loops. And now I'm going to bring our needle down through the back side. That's better. That's going to be a lot easier to get onto our button. Bring our needle and thread down to the underside where we're going to tie off our knot. Yeah. And here we are. Tied off this knot here. Couple back stitches just to make sure nothing's coming out. Our new loop is ready. We're going to take our loop, and we're going to put our loop on top of our button. There we go. Much easier. We want to tuck in the sides, these little things that are sticking out, and flare out so we get that triangle look. A couple of things I'm going to point out. First of all, with our loop being longer, now there could be a problem that it's going to pop off. It's that catch-22. We don't want it too small that we can't get on, but also if it's this size, it may come off. And there's a little trick you're going to tell your client the day of the wedding. But I want us to take a look at how this is looking now that we actually have our button and our loop in place. Our loop is about, I'd say, 3/4 of an inch long. When we did test pinning, you've got to remember that this was pinned up like this, and now there's a little bit more resting on the ground. So that is something to always keep in mind. If we pin our dress to here, and then when we put our loop in, if we know our loop's going to be about 3/4 of an inch, we can always bring our loop, the actual loop placement down from our original point 3/4 of an inch. But what I usually do is when I pin this into place, I only have like a little bit, this is like 1 inch resting on the ground, because I know that we're going to want to loop just a hair more. So now with our loop, we have just the perfect amount touching the ground. Just enough that, you know, as our bride is walking, we still have that train effect, but not so much that people are going to be stepping on it. So I'm happy with this look and this placement. What I want to show you is what we would tell our bride the day of the wedding. What we're going to do is, before we put this onto the bustle, we're actually going to twist the whole skirt, put the bustle loop on, and then untwist. And what's that going to do is it's going to twist up our threads enough that it's going to tighten our loop so that it's not going to be pulling off. Our loop is twisted a couple of times. That's going to help secure and make sure that even if someone happens to, you know, push the skirt up, the loop is not going to come off our button. That is a trick we always tell our bride the day of the wedding. Let's take a look at what we have here. As I mentioned earlier, if this was on an actual bride, we're going to have her walking around so we can see how all this is moving while she has the dress on. And one thing I want you to keep in mind, something may bother you. And if it's really something that you should be saying, yes, make sure you tell your bride, point it out and make a suggestion. But there are also times where something might be bothering me. I might be thinking, oh, should I be tacking this on here to keep this held out as she's walking around? Because as she's walking, if it just kind of starts pulling and looking like that, which it's fine, but if it doesn't bother them, I wouldn't say anything. What you can do is just let it go. And if they happen to say, oh, it's looking a little messy as she's walking, is there something we can do? Then yes, there's something we can do. But I almost wouldn't bring something like this to their attention, because then if you can't fix it, or even if we were to pin this, put like let's say we had like a couple of small snaps and we snap this into place. And then if it started pulling on the dress, then now you have another problem. So some things you just, it might not even be an issue. So don't draw it to their attention. Remember, you're the professional, and there might be something that you might think, you know, should I do this or should I suggest this? But you'll get to know your client. I have known clients where, yes, the fact that this is not standing out like this would be an issue. I would know that, yes, we're going to have to do something. And then I have clients that I know that are really easygoing, that they'd probably even be happy just carrying their train the whole time they're at the reception. So that is just up to your client. Let's move her around a little. She's moving around at the wedding. Move her forward. Not bad. I probably would still, if it was me, suggest to bring it up a little bit more. The extra, like I mentioned, the extra just has to do with the fact that I didn't accommodate for our loop length here. Plus, it looks like my button's pulling down due to this interior panel. Oh, messy. That's why I kind of like rather work on a client, but for a video like this, working on a client they'd have to stand here for too long. Let's bring up that panel. There we go. Oh, that's better now. Our modesty panel inside our corset here wasn't tacked at all, so that's why she's moving around a little bit. There, we'll just put that under. And that's better. I prefer that length there, I think, yes. Yeah. And that's really all that there is to this particular bustle. What I find amazing, this is a 1-point bustle, which means 1 loop and 1 button. When I worked for a bridal shop, the fee that we charged our clients for this particular alteration was $120. So you can take on and do that yourself. I don't charge $120. I charge $50, which I still feel like I'm stealing from my client. But if a bride is willing to pay $120, and why not charge similar? Even if you want to charge a little less, that's fine. But the fact that bridal is a specialty area, you might as well join in and you know, make some of the money that the bridal shops are making.